Hello, my name is Vigil. This is my stream journal. The date is 7/11/2022. The time is 1740. Today I wanted to talk about, well, violence essentially. I wrote a tweet earlier this morning when the thought crossed my mind. I was feeling upset and I started thinking about, just the different realities or whatever that we live in. Hold on. Okay, so our society really has to ask what level of violence we're willing to use to maintain the society. Violence prevents evil, and the two must be delineated more clearly. A sharper contrast is needed between using force to subdue evil and force as the means to do evil. The police are violence incarnate, as is the court systems and prison system. When does violence become evil? Is it hiding in plain sight with culturally conditioned acceptance of our prison systems? The cartels use torture and mutilations because they don't have the prisons that we use to throw away lives. A 20-year sentence for trashing a statue is worse than a public mutilating of cutting off a hand, but it hides in plain sight. The only reason heaven is able to maintain itself as holy is because it has a prison system of hell. The rest of it is just religious politics. So, what I mean by this is that violence itself, I think it's an action. It's not necessarily good or evil. It can be used for good or evil. Violence can be used to subdue and suppress evil, but it can also be used to do evil. And the same action can be both, the same exact thing you do can be both good and evil depending on the context, the severity of what you're doing. But I think we have in our society a very poor understanding of what evil is and what love is and what good is, and we condone our society has it's a, I don't want to call it hypocrisy, but a contradiction that's not quite a paradox because it doesn't logically work. Paradoxes are contradictions that exist. This is one that exists, but it doesn't work very well, and we can see that in our society. For example, we teach our kids not to hit each other. We teach our kids not to hit each other, and then we send them to war to kill people, and we wonder why they come back all mentally fucked up. There's several types of PTSD, but one of them is ethical fatigue. And this ethical fatigue, essentially, they're taught when they're little to love each other, to not hit each other, and we punish them severely if they get in a fist fight. And then we put them in a military uniform, give them a gun, and they go kill people on our commands. I guess I myself have been subjected to levels of violence, some of it self-inflicted for self-mortification for my religion, and some of it by the prison system, some of it by the courts. I often feel intimidated when the cops drive by like I'm doing something wrong, which is the definition of terrorism that we use in our country, using the threat of violence to forcibly coerce somebody's behavior is the definition of terrorism. It's also what the police do. So our society abhors violence, yet we're known across the world for using waterboarding, hellfiring shooting children with hellfire missiles, torturing people, and we have this illusion that we're better off with stronger police, stronger prison systems, when in reality those inflict a level of violence against our society that's almost silent. Police shooting you is pretty overt, but it's become commonplace. And the prison system is hidden from it's hidden from our view. We have legend and lore around our prison system. It's known as a concrete box where there's a high probability of getting raped. And we've just culturally come to accept that that's what prison is. And our use of violence has borderline become terroristic. Being caught with a small amount of some sort of harmless drug that only harms you when you use it has become a huge moral taboo, something that should be considered horrible, and most of the population disagrees with it, but we've lost control of our democracy. It's a republic, but we lost control of the government, and so we can't actually get rid of the war on terror or get rid of the war on drugs. And I guess I comprehend why the cartels use mutilation, why they torture people. They don't have a prison system infrastructure. If in America you do something that they don't want you to do, they'll put you in prison. And like I've seen the court systems, it's a rigged thing. Like it's completely rigged. They have the ability to frame you, throw you away without trial, with the illusion that it's legitimate, and no one can do anything about it because it has the illusion of legitimacy. Like, and then you get put in a cage and you get psychologically tortured. They pit the prisoners against each other, which is just horrid. The guards are delusional, and like, so we have this giant infrastructure in order to grab people, put them in prison, torture them until they comply. Use cops to terrorize them. Literal definition of terrorism is what the cops do now. And so like we're using terrorism against our own population with a horrid amount of violence. Like getting 10 years or 15 years for having like some sort of drug is absurd. It's an artificial outcome. There's natural outcomes and there's artificial outcomes to every action. Natural outcomes are determined by the laws of nature and physics. You do drugs enough, you might die. Artificial outcomes are you do drugs, we'll torture you for 10 to 15 years in a cage after rigging a trial or rigging the legislator to give to make it so drugs are legal when they shouldn't be. We're a libertarian society, but we're supposed to be at least. So like we have this massive amount of infrastructure that's built for putting people away, like putting people in prisons, burying them, torturing them, and it's a for-profit prison system. But then the cartels, which are subject to our DEA, our foreign internal defense forces or military, they're targeting the cartels now, even though the CIA runs them, and like the cartels, if they catch you doing something that they don't want you to do, they'll torture you. But this torture only lasts, like, they'll mutilate you and then kill you. That's like, it lasts for like a small amount of time. It's a high amount of pain over a small amount of time versus a relatively high amount of pain over years. So like, honestly, if you had the choice of having your finger cut off or losing 5 years to a prison system, you would choose to lose the finger. Like, that's reality. That's what most people would pick. Like, if you had the choice of 6 months in jail or 10 lashings, you pick the lashings. Like, will it operate and condition your behavior and make you avoid it? It depends on what you're doing. If you're doing something that really means a lot to you, like politically, like political activism, or like some sort of ideology, getting whipped 10 times, or even put in prison for six months, it doesn't have that much of an effect on your belief system. It sucks. And like you'll learn to hate the person who's targeting you, which then has to be overcome, I think, which sucks too, because it's hard to love people who do horrible things to you. It's necessary though to live your life. If you want to be happy, you have to rid yourself of hate no matter what is done to you. And like I wrote today, you really shouldn't have kids or be a politician if you have any hate in you. And by politician, I mean any form of leadership. But so, like, our prison system is an abhorrent amount of violence, but we've legitimized it. And while our society claims we abhor what is evil and we abhor violence, we're using violence against our own population to subdue a percentage of the population with it. And like, but then we think that like these cartels, which are subject to, like if they get caught transferring like drugs over the border, they can get like 20 years. 20 years in a cage is far worse than having like your like a thumb cut off or like a ring finger cut off. Like it's predominantly worse. Like you even losing a whole hand is less than 20 years in a cage, especially if you're young. Like so like the reality is that our prison system is more violent than the cartels, and we wonder why the cartels are violent. They don't have the infrastructure to enforce that level of discipline on their own populace, that they control their territory. And they're subject to obscene amounts of violence from our system, which we can't even fathom as being violent anymore, because it's just, in our idea, it's just a stable component of society. But it's not. It's degrading our society. It targets our own children, like maximum security prison systems where they torture you and put you in cages and shit, and you're with other violent offenders who like target each other with gang mentality. And like the prison systems, if all of the gangs united into a single gang and stopped targeting each other, militarized, educated, and formed a new government, because of the war on drugs, it would make up like 30 to 40% of the population. Without the war on drugs, one, there'd be no black market, so there's no crime. There's no drug abuse like there was during Prohibition with alcohol. There's all these, the balance of the budget, national budget is fixed. No more cartel violence because they don't need to torture people in order to, it's like Prohibition creates the problems, but like if our population, the people who are targeted by the government, called deplorables, said they're these evil, violent criminals, if they banded together, united all their communities together, they would be a substantial portion of the population. It'd be a civil war, which is one of the reasons the government tries very hard to divide and destroy us. And it's not just the government. There's good people who work in the government. There are. I think they're naive. It's like the soldiers who think that they're liberating Iraq, when really they're just smashing it up. But to come back to my original conversational point, violence. When is violence okay to use? To what level can it be used? It's like the Aristotle's definition of anger management, or intelligent anger, is knowing what to be upset about, when to be upset about it, how much to be upset about it, and who to be upset with. And then in the same regard, our society needs to really start questioning some of these belief systems we have. The belief that 15 years in a cage for a couple of whatever units of drug is acceptable in our society. In a libertarian society, it's not. And the war on drugs needs to end completely. It just needs to be ended. Whether we do it state by state, local county by local county till it's gone, or whether we do it from the top down, it needs to be removed. And I think we should stop vilifying this other community that is currently invading, the South American, combined with the rest of the immigration from all the world that is running to our borders as the system collapses. I think we should really recognize that we're not special as Americans. We're not ethically superior. American exceptionalism is a lie. Our system is not the superior system. It's the system that we want. And the neocon belief system that you can forcibly push democracy onto the rest of the world through guns doesn't make sense. If you read The Prince by Machiavelli, Niccolo Machiavelli, he talks about how a nation that wasn't free, that's liberated, will slowly but surely, and oftentimes in a fast way, sink back into tyranny. And we saw that in Iran, or we saw that in Iraq. And Afghanistan, the same thing. If we don't comprehend that American ideology is not the finished product of what creation can produce, some sort of pinnacle of human creation, it leaves us vulnerable and blind to our own biases. And what we call the cartels, these murderous monsters. America killed 1 million people with high-tech industrial weaponry in the Iraq invasion for no reason. The little bottle of white powder he had at the UN, it was probably cocaine, to be honest. That was probably an inside joke. He held up a vial of cocaine, called it anthrax. That's what I guess. But our use of violence in our society, we abhor it as a community. We say violence is terrible, love will defeat evil. Like I've gone over, love is not the antithesis or antonym of evil. Love can permit evil because love does whatever it can for that which is loved, even if that is what needs. Even if that is what they've screwed up the wording. Even if love is doing evil for that which is loved, it's still love, but it's still evil simultaneously. So love can do evil for that which is loved. So love and evil are not antonyms. Violence in our society, we won't teach our children how to fist fight. We won't teach them how to we have nerfed our country so much because of liability and these false twisted ideologies that says we have to love each other when we don't. You don't have to love your fellow neighbor in America. That's part of our freedom, is that you don't have to get along with everyone. And but the use of violence in our society, it's completely blind. It's a blind man swinging a sword around in a crowded area. The belief is that our society is loving. We don't use cruel and unusual punishment. We don't torture people. We don't do what is unethical as a society in general. And if you do, we find it abhorrent. That's not reality, man. Like 20 years prison sentences for having drugs on you is a level of violence that is greater than the cartels killing you. Like, getting killed by the cartels or mutilated or whatever is on par with the punishment our country uses for carrying drugs on you. And like, that means like it's just a different kind of torture. Like 20 years in a cage is torturous. There's no mercy in that. There's no grace, or like there's nothing but the desire to inflict a huge amount of suffering on this person who we've labeled deplorable, criminal, and who we think by torturing we can trick the rest of the population into submission as the cops drive around with speakers or with like mics searching for us and shit like that. Like, the reality is like the reality is that our country is brainwashed, blind, and in decay pretty severely. Like, but I think we should now start these conversations and get them going. And like, we have to realize that American democracy, which is a new thing, it wasn't founded as a democracy. We were founded as a limited republic, limited democratic constitutional republic. Or what that means is that the aristocracy of our society were the ones who controlled government, and it was a republic, and like it was elected representation. But the democracy of who could vote was limited because they thought only educated people should vote. Over time, we used the Constitution to rewrite it, and it became a democracy. But it still has the republic model, which is why we have so much trouble in our society. That what was founded as a republic is now a democracy, which our forefathers hated. But this democracy is running the system as if it's a republic still. So it's this amalgamation of just like that's stupidly corrupted, and we have allowed corporations or economic systems to grow so large that a corporocratic state has developed. And this corporocratic state controls the government with a revolving door, with the military-industrial complex, the Fortune 500 companies, the oil companies. They all have representation, not just lobbyists and campaign funds, but the revolving door of government workers between all these different systems. So a corporocratic government is when the corporations or the economy controls the government. And our economy, because of Reagan's trickle-down economics, the allowance of permanent corporations, Glass-Steagall Act removal, wealth disparity and stuff like that, globalism, shareholder ideology, like, it's an oligarch. It's an oligarchy. Rather than an aristocracy, it's an oligarch. And this oligarch, which controls our economy through a corporocratic government, controls the government, which controls the laws, which control their business. And like, socialism is when the belief that like the government should control the economics. Corporatism is when businesses control the government. The reality is socialism and corporatism are the same thing. They're both one hand over the other, but it's the same person controlling the puppeteer strings. And so our society, which founded as a republic, became a democracy over time. Economy grew to the point that like corporocratic government could begin to be forming, and then the wealth disparity created oligarchs. What that means is that we're a democracy running a republic model that is actually corporocratic, with the hidden hand of all these elite shareholders and stuff like that, and these wealthy banks, and like all the corporations that we're even scared to name, like. But segueing, we should start these conversations now and really begin to address the various things that are affecting our government and our society and our lives. The war on terror failed completely. It's a failed idea. Like, it's failed completely, and it's created a key turn tyranny where like Big Brother has so much backlogs of us that can be searched instantly as soon as they want to find out everything about you, that no citizen is safe, especially when government then corrupts, which it is. And like, our economy is completely shattered. It's not a free market capitalist society. It's not regulated capitalism. It's actually a form of corporocratic socialism working with state-controlled communism in China, and the Federal Reserve is a socialist mechanism. And so like, the deregulation actually creates a corporocratic government, which is socialism, and then the regulation that does work, that is being passed, which is like restricting various small businesses and whatnot, and like it's the things that do need regulated aren't, and the things that don't need regulated are. And our free market belief system, it's revved by the Federal Reserve, which is a socialist Keynesian economics mechanism. It's controlled by the corporations, which makes it socialist, but just with the other hand, with the corporations above instead of the government above. But completely non sequitur. 60 years ago or whatever, Roe vs. Wade happened, and it was determined that women have the right to get abortion. I don't have an opinion on it. I do, but I'm not going to say it. But then you had 60 years. You had 60 years to codify it. But every time the argument was brought up, you said, "Well, the Supreme Court has decided this," and now that the Supreme Court sides against you, you've decided that it's no longer valid, which means it was never valid. But you used it for 60 years in your arguments. And then the belief that it's a patriarch, Christian, male, white, hierarchy, chauvinistic thing that prevents women from having the choice ignores the reality that 1/3 of women, and I've met a lot of these women, agree with the new law. 1/3 of women. That's like 40 million Americans. Like, what this means is that feminism is now trying to silence 1/3 of women, or at least the community that is more vocal and more violent, is trying to say they are the choice and they're the voice of females, and the 1/3 that vote against them are brainwashed, not real females, not feminists, even though they're females. So feminism is now splitting as we hit the fourth wave feminism because of the louder voices that wanted to force this stereotype of what feminism is onto the female population and then blame the male population for anything that goes against it, has created this splitting branching of feminism. And I think it's going to become more pronounced as time goes on. Like, if you have 3 women in a room and 2 of the women tell the other woman that she's not, like that her opinion of what being female is doesn't count, that's doing what the males did to females before first wave feminism. So it's like it's a stupid belief system now. Like, do women deserve equal pay? In most jobs, yes. Construction, firefighting, things that require physical labor, I don't know. Like, if a woman physically, and we see this in the argument of transgender sports. But first, okay, so transgender sports, let it be. Like, let women and boys, or women and men compete against each other, but then create divisions. So AAA, AA, A, and it's based upon ability. So like, instead of having these 2 teams or 2 different sports, you have them merged together, and then you break them apart into divisions based upon how strong and how good at the game they are. The top division will be like the elite. It'll be mostly males in physical sports, but there can be women. But it'll keep the system fair, where everyone is competing against their own skill set level, not their own sex. But feminism is now saying that 1/3 of women's voices does not count, and they're saying that it's male chauvinisms that are pushing this abortion thing onto them. But the reality is it's not. It's 1/3 of women who are part of our population who have just as much right to say what feminism is. And like, fourth wave feminism is a failure. It's collapsing like right now. Like, transgender men have more voice in what feminism is than 1/3 of the female population, and they're not all Christian. But a lot of women who aren't Christian, not a lot. A percentage of women in that 1/3 aren't Christian. They have no influence by male figures, and they simply choose to believe that abortion is wrong, based upon their own morality, their own anecdotal experiences. But to segue back into what I was talking about, violence. We have to decide as a society, one, we have to start recognizing that violence is itself simply an action that can be used to subdue evil or to do evil. And we have to stop this belief system that America has like this exceptionalism that makes what we do always holy. Just because we're a democracy doesn't mean we always make good choices. And just because we're a democracy doesn't mean we can do anything we want. And just because we're a democracy, it doesn't mean that our laws are ethical or should be passed, simply because we all vote on it. Like the mobocracy. So like government, when you look at it, there's monarchy, which can become a tyranny. There's aristocracy, which can become an oligarch. There's democracy, which can become mobocracy. And that's what we're seeing in our society. Like, Do I think violence is okay in some regards? Yes, I do. I genuinely do. I think if I saw a little old lady getting beat up by somebody, I would try to intervene with kinetic force, kinetic direct action. And like, do I think at other times violent is abhorrent? Yeah, I do. If you get caught with weed, that used to be a huge punishment. In some places it might still be, like, but it's obnoxious. Like, violence should only be used to defend liberty, not safety. Like, safety in our country should be irrelevant. Liability should be got. We should rid ourselves of liability. I get that it makes products safer, but like we've nerfed our country, created what is known as a police state, which is where every single thing we do has a law regarding how we can or cannot do it. And we're not supposed to be that in America. We're a libertarian ethos, and that's fallen away. And like, if you look at our politics, it's just fucking insane how corrupt it is. Like, the right-wing religious, because of Billy Graham, like this right-wing conservative religious community, and conservatism and the word progressive have different meanings depending on what era you're in and what location. Conservatism simply means that you believe in the old ways. Progressivism means you believe in the new ways. Like, but they can mean completely different things. The day the revolution happens, a revolutionary becomes a conservative because it changes and manipulates the whole understanding of things. But you have the Democrats, which are socialists, neoliberal, so they're corporatists, who believe that these warped ideologies of like secular atheism combined with like transgender, gay, bi rights and whatnot, like they have a warped ideology, and like they hate religions that aren't theirs. They hate ideologies that aren't theirs. Like, they have a complete like twisted warping of reality. They believe in welfare and stuff like that, and like the anti-gun, pro-choice. And then you have this other warping on the right, which is hardcore religious, pro-gun, pro-life. They believe in neo-fascism. Well, the other one is socialist, which is like, it's the same mirror image, just with different models. But the thing is that we were supposed to be a republic. In a republic, like our George Washington said, political parties will destroy us. Like the right and the left, are neither of them are the republic model. The neoliberals want global corporatism, and they have warped secular belief systems that are based upon these weird fascinations and idealizations of like gay marriage and transgender, and like they're pro-welfare and stuff like that. And like the right, which is neo-fascist corporatism, but it's a different kind of corporatism. Like, neither of them are the model of the republic, but we can't get away from them because the news media hydra, which is 5% of the corporations owning 90% of the news media, completely blind us. And like, we think we're in revolution all the time. Like, we sing songs about revolutions and stuff like that, like in our rock and roll art. And like, the reality is that it's sedation. We're watching entertainment thinking we're these great revolutionaries. But when is it okay to use violence? Like, that's the question, I guess, that I keep segueing in and out of as I non-sequenter and I talk about all this other stuff. When is it okay to use physical force to subdue somebody? When is it okay to use physical force to literally take a life? When is it okay to hit people, to force your belief system onto them with violence? I think that most knee-jerk reactions of Americans is it's never okay. You know, like, we're the community of love, and like we condone evil, and violence is evil, and so we don't do violence because we are loving people who don't do evil. But like, without violence, evil will always prevail, always. Like, if you do not use a level of violence to maintain order in a society, it erupts into something that is not. It's not anarchy or the lack of laws. It's alegalism, where like laws are passed but only enforced when they want them to be. Laws that shouldn't be passed are passed. Like Mexico's alegalism. America's slowly becoming that. It's corruption that has infrastructure. So it's like lawlessness, like anarchy, but with infrastructure that still functions, which is the most terrifying system that can exist. Like, no matter what you believe in, monarchy, theocracy, when you have bureaucracy that picks and chooses. It doesn't follow its own rules when it condones doing anything at any time in order to keep itself safe. Hold on, my computer just shut off the screen. I don't know if it's still recording. I have to change my password after that. So, like, when you have a society that doesn't condone evil but does it constantly, like our wars, our anti-terrorism tactics, torturing people with waterboarding cages, stress positions and shit, drugging, I guess all of this, our nation has failed to pass on to my generation, from what I've seen and from my own experience, an ethos, a belief system, a value system, virtues that actually work. Like, there's no pragmatism in anything America has taught me at all. And, like, it's all these warped ideological belief systems. Like, don't hit that person when you're little. Later go to war and kill them. Doesn't make sense. Don't use drugs. Drugs are harmful to you. But because you touch drugs, we're putting you in a cage. Well, you'll be sadistically, psychologically tortured and lose out on. So far, I've lost a sixth of my life, but you'll lose a huge portion of your life. We don't do this, but later we do something far worse. Essentially, is my argument. Like, so I think our society should move back to libertarian values. While reclaiming, or not redefining, but re-examining the words and semantics and glittering generalities that we've been using, like the Obama campaign, hope and change, means literally nothing. It's a glittering generality, a term from propaganda, like propaganda science. Glittering meaning sparkling or like really flashy, generality or something that has really no meaning. Hope and change that we can believe in doesn't mean a single fucking thing. The entire nation fell for it. And like, build back better. You know, like if you want to Google what's happening in Afghanistan right now, they're using the $80 billion worth of weaponry we left behind to train their new military in our fucking style of military training. If you watch the videos, it looks like an American boot camp. They're building back better. Like, I guess I keep reiterating to this point, but like, what is okay to do violent? Like, when is it okay to do violence? And should we allow our kids to be subjected by their peer group and their environment to a level of violence without interfering with it, you know, making sure it doesn't cross the line that we have to determine case by case rather than having like a formula or whatever, like live by the spirit of the idea. But like, if your kid gets in a fight at school, put them in a boxing ring with the other kid. Put their gloves on them for the safety liability, but then let them actually box. That will settle the dispute, and you'll stop having school shootings. Like, but I guess if we're going to send kids to war at the age of 18 before they can drink or now use cigarettes or smoke weed, you know, killing people before they're allowed to expand their mind, and then when they come home, denying them ketamine because the drug enforcement has decided not to allow it, so their brains won't heal. If we're going to send kids to war at the age of 18, we should let them get in fistfights at the age of 14. Like, it's a failed, flawed ideological belief system that now is considered to be America. And I call it Neo-America, or the New America. The America that I grew up in is the Neo-America. The ideological belief systems that we were taught from the past, they say are from the past, like the whitewashed history, the victors was American exceptionalism, and now we have like this rebuff against the whitewashing of our history with this anti-American, like Green Day talks about subliminal fuck America. I, for one, America is so distorted, so warped, so fractured, with so many people believing so many convoluted, self-defeating logic arguments like that they hyperlink to. Like, so what I mean by hyperlinking is like, oh, you're a capitalist. And then that's all they say. And suddenly, like, all this meaning. Like, do you know how much depth the term capitalism actually has? Like, memeplexes that should explode your mind if you went to, if you had a graduate degree in history, like economics, political science, sociology, and shit like that, which I don't. But like, if you had it that the term capitalism would make all this sense to you, and you'd have all these arguments and shit because you trained for hours reading them in school. But then on the internet, some dude just says capitalism is stupid, fucking pigs, and like chauvinistic bourgeoisie or whatever they're called, and like it's hyperlinking. It's where you don't actually say anything; you just say a key word that you then say wins the argument. They used to do this like it's like our national debates on TV. They bring up, okay, so you believe that killing babies is okay. And they go, whoa, you believe that taking rights from women is okay. And the other person goes, well, God says to. And then the other person used to say, but the Supreme Court decided it's our liberty. And now it's gotten fucked up. So it's like, you said your Supreme Court is no longer valid to us because it suddenly disagrees with us. Even though we had 60 years to codify it, but we never did because we agreed that the Supreme Court had the ability to make that decision, which suddenly they don't because it no longer sides with us. And like the other side is like, well, it sides with us now, so what the fuck are you gonna do? Like, and like, but they hyperlink. I guess I'm trying to say. I segue a lot. I digress, non sequitur. The hyperlinking is when you don't actually have a full understanding of the argument. You just use the keywords and the formulas that other people have written. Like, oh, you hate freedom, and the other person's like, no, you hate babies or whatever. You know, like or like you're a capitalist. No, you're a communist. Or you're a Democrat. You're a demon rat, and like you're a Trumpette. You believe in Trump or whatever. Like, there's no depth to the arguments, and we're all echoing what we hear on TV, and the TV is self-reinforcing this. Like, to come back to my original point, this is kind of how I think. It's really disjointed and it's kind of disordered, but what level of violence is our society going to accept now that we've separated this idea that violence is the antithesis of love, which isn't true? Love can use violence to subdue what is evil for that which is loved. This belief that evil and love are antonyms of each other, which is not true. It's a failed ideology of Christianity that pushed morality onto us and natural law for 2,000 years. And now we see that, like, if you love someone, you will do evil because you love them. Or if you love something, you will do evil because you love it. Or are willing to do evil because of it. Like, if you love morality, then you won't do evil things because of your love for morality. So I guess there's, like, caveats. But now that I've separated violence from hatred and violence from like evil, and shown you that love is not the antithesis of evil, it can actually do evil. What does this leave our entire society's framework with? Like, love will conquer hate? What the fuck does that mean? It's a glittering generality. Or like, love will prevail over evil. Like, dude, the strongest group of people, the ones who are most adaptable, are the ones who are going to win. Like, so like, or then like, you can't use violence at all, pacifism, otherwise you're evil and doing harm, and like, it's bullshit. If you don't use a level of evil, you'll have complete alegalism with a bureaucracy built around it, which is like industrialized tyranny. Like, that's what we're headed for, is industrialized technocratic tyranny with big brother police states and blind populaces can't argue anything because they're using glittering generalities that are hyperlinking to arguments that they don't understand, that always never reach any conclusion ever. Like, on the internet, when people argue, nothing is ever resolved, ever. Like, in 20 years that I've been on the internet, nothing has ever been resolved. No one has ever changed their mind because of an argument, and we've never hashed out anything new, ever. Like, it's like, it's just humorous to me, I guess. But so what is the level of violence that you're willing to teach your kids to use to defend themselves, to defend what they love, and to defend society, and defend your civilization, defend what is upright? Because, like, right now, you won't let your kids hit each other in school, or you won't let them get in fistfights without severe consequences, but you'll give them a gun at 18 and send them to a foreign land to kill people for no good reason. It wasn't a vial of anthrax, it was probably cocaine, just to mock the world. That's my guess. And, like, our leaderships suck. Like, we know they're corrupted, stupid idiots that are probably puppets for someone else, but we can't get rid of them. And so, like, we keep rallying behind them. I've seen this. I'm 30 now, so the year is 2022. I have seen Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden now. Horrible people, shitty presidents. The best, like, one took us to war, the other one promised us glittering generalities. The other one, I didn't see a lot of his presidency because I was in jail, because they framed me for talking like this to people, my guess. And then you have Biden, which is like the worst president I've ever seen. And I've seen George Bush, Obama, and Trump. Like, they're like the fucking four horsemen of the apocalypse, but incompetent and not as cool. And like, it's just, I'm thinking about this because like I have to know what level of violence, and I don't plan on doing violence ever, like ever. But I think that challenging people's beliefs can be considered a form of violence because it's psychologically painful. You get yelling arguments and stuff. But anyways, if you have a kid and he's getting bullied at school, do you teach him how to fight back, or do you solve the problem for him? And then later in life, he'll have safe spaces in college dorms. Well, at the same time, if he says anything that goes against the grain, the entire hive mind collective cancels him. And like, that's violence, and it's abhorrent because it's liberty, it's libertarian, it's community hive mind censorship. It's like if you have a bunch of Agent Smiths, like essentially, the next time you see Antifa or a pro-religious group or whatever target an individual, imagine that scene in The Matrix where Neo is just surrounded by the agents. And that's essentially what's happening. Like, on the internet, on any place where anyone says anything that challenges the narrative, and if you truly start to challenge the narrative, they'll fucking kill you. Like, they will. They'll execute you. And like, or they'll frame you for crimes. They'll torture you. They'll, like, it's where we're headed. It's where we're already at. We don't know it yet because they have such a nice veil over our society. But we're corrupt as fuck. We're in an illegal environment that's bureaucratic, that's a corporocratic government ruled by oligarchs that are running a police state with central intelligence agencies like NSA and shit like that, like targeting our own populations with monitoring, because we're convinced, like, Nancy Pelosi was like, the enemy is within, right after the June 6th riots or whatever. She's like, the enemy is within, which means our populace is now the enemy. And like, you had comments that I can't believe they get away with these comments without impeachment. They were talking about outlawing rifles, AR-15s and shit like that, which, can you imagine if Ukraine didn't have rifles right now? Or like, they talk about like, there's no way you can defeat the American military with rifles. And like, the fact they're even saying that means we need better weaponry. Like, that's what we need, is like, we need militias or National Guard to become more, like, we have to move power back to the states away from the federal government, I think, in a lot of regards. And like, we have to reel in our government, and we don't know if we can. Like, that's what's so scary about it, is like, we don't know if our government will abdicate, if they'll give up their power back to the people. It seems highly unlikely. But the thing is we have to start recognizing that everything they taught us, even our fucking words that we use, have been warped, distorted, and destroyed. Like when I say Christian, you have all these preconceptions, but like, or when I say capitalist, you have all these preconceptions. If I say atheist, you have all these preconceptions, and they're all controlled by what we watch on TV, which is programming us while we watch it. So to reiterate, do you teach your kids how to fist fight when they're growing up? I say yes. I think that, one, you should always, like, kids should learn self-defense when they're little. Not only that, if you combine it with ethics training, virtue training, ethos training, their physical violence becomes what tames them. Like, a child who is taught how to box, taught how to fist fight, but taught at the same time when to fight and how to control his anger in the Aristotelian manner, anger management, stress therapy, and he learns how to control his limbic system through a feedback mechanism that's physical, combined with self-defense training. He will be healthier and happier later in life, and he won't be the one who shoots up the school. The kid who doesn't get fist fight training is the one who shoots up the school. And like, our level of violence as a society, we have to reel it in. Like, the war on drugs must end. And like, the use of prison systems that are for profit, which is idiotic. Like, obviously there's corruption in that. But like our prison systems, we've got to reel them in. We have to reduce sentencing for certain things. Like we have to change the model of prison systems. We have to change what they are. Like we have to change them towards rehabilitation, education. What we should do is say, rather than here you got 5 years for your stealing a car, you have to stay in prison for a certain amount of time, or you can leave early if you finish an entire college degree, which our government will pay for and provide while you're in jail, and you'll live in a relatively non-violent place. Like when you inflict pain onto a person, when they get out, they have a hard time reincorporating into society. It's like Carl Sagan talked about, um, those who are tortured tend to torture. Like the offend rate, or like whatever it's called, of our prison population is huge, because we torture them in cages, then we let them out, then they commit a crime again because they're all fucked up in the head now, then we put them back in, and we're surprised that this is happening. Like, I think we need to overnight overhaul our entire judicial system, and we see that there's 2/3 of the population that now agree that the judicial system is fucked. They loved it until it sided against them, which kind of shows the insincerity of the whole argument they had. I'm not pro-choice or pro-life personally. I just think it's fucked up what I've been seeing lately, like grown men targeting women with approval of the 2/3 majority, because the 1/3 is and against what the other women want. And like, it's not a unified voice in feminism. Like, the female population is feminism, like, and they're not a unified voice. And like, I think fourth wave feminism, or whatever we're in, fifth wave, is an ideology that is collapsing in real time, but they won't acknowledge it. And like, so I think this 1/3 of women who have been quiet for a very long time are going to get a little more vocal, or they'll completely be oppressed by the majority of the female population, and like, they'll be subjected to what happened to women a long time ago. And it's an ironic twist, but like, do you teach your kids how to fist fight? Would you prefer being lashed 10 times or losing 6 months, or like a year, or like having your finger cut off versus doing 10 years in jail? Like, I think most of us would pick the corporal punishment, because losing time is far worse than corporal punishment in some regards. Like, mutilation of your body is pretty fucked up, but paying compliance instead of losing time. If you're trying to condition an aversion to something, the paying compliance will do the trick. But like, if you're trying to break somebody's ideology, or like use the prison system to make them not do something, and it's their belief system, your prison system ain't gonna work, no matter what amount of violence you use against them. But I don't know, this is a long video, I segued a whole bunch. Thanks for watching.